trust me when I say that this could save you a lot of money in the long run.
Welcome back to Landline Now. If you've listened to our show over the past few years, you've heard us report on how data thieves are targeting just about everyone these days, including motor carriers and owner-operators, which is why the OOIDA Foundation recently sent out an email to OOIDA members with some advice. And joining us now to spread the message even further is Charles Sperry, research analyst with the foundation. Charles, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
So as I mentioned there, you recently sent out this email kind of warning folks, I guess, about the dangers of data theft. Again, a topic that keeps coming up over and over again. We're going to get to the advice here in just a moment. Before we do that, though, why exactly did the foundation choose this moment, I suppose, to tackle this issue?
A combination of different things. One, just life is always getting more and more connected to the internet, to the digital world, as it were. And so starting with 2025, with the big AI boom that's been happening, there's a few developments that have been occurring. And so we decided that it was just time to tackle this issue again and get people updated on what's going on.
Yeah, and it's really running rampant. It's a numbers game for these scammers because they send these things out to I don't know how many people, a lot of people, and if they get a few people to bite on it, obviously, it's beneficial for them, but it can mess up your life pretty quickly and pretty severely if they get you in this. In the email that you sent out, you kind of tell a far too common story with a fictionalized independent owner-operator you called Joe. Mm-hmm. Joe really, though, could be anybody out there. Let's talk about what happened to Joe in this story because it kind of gives us a launching point to talk about the things that people can do to protect themselves.
Sure. Yeah, Joe is just, your everyday, your common Joe, as it were. And he is a little bit less careful with this data than he probably should be, and wakes up one day to find all his bank accounts drained and his fuel card maxed out, and that people have been doing loads under his name, and it sure wasn't him. And so basically his credit is ruined, his reputation is tarnished, and it's going to take a whole lot to get it fixed if he's ever able to fix it. I mean, a lot of people, after just one incident like that, they just end up out of business.
Yeah, if you know somebody or you yourself have had your identity stolen or had anything happen like this before, you know that it's an absolute mess to get things back on track, to explain to all these companies and people that this was not me. I was, victim of a crime here. So as you kind of point out in the email, prevention really is the best medicine with all this. There are no fail-safes. There's nothing you can do that will protect you 100% of the time, but there are a number of things that you can do to protect yourself most of the time. And we talk about that when we talk about protecting yourself. The big companies, they have the resources to put some of those fail-safes in place. Independent owner-operators often don't have those protections in place. Generally speaking, though, when we talk about truck drivers, they are vulnerable for a number of reasons for this type of crime. Can you explain a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, well, part of it is that you're a business. You're a public-facing business. So a lot of your information is just available publicly. And data thieves and identity thieves are going to take advantage of that and take every bit of that public information that they can and make use of it. And there's multiple different things that you can do, kind of starting with try to limit how much of your data is publicly available, how much of your information is publicly available. If you can use a separate business and mailing address from your own personal address, that's ideal. So you want to basically separate your personal life from your business life. Use a different business address, use a different business phone, use a different business email. Don't mix everything together. That'll make it just a extra little bit more difficult for hackers and for criminals to get you. And one of the big things that you have to understand, you don't have to make yourself Fort Knox. You're never going to be able to make yourself completely invulnerable. However, what you can do, it's kind of like the old story with the bear. You don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than everybody else there. There's a lot of people out there that aren't taking care of their digital footprint. And if you can be more secure than they are, most of the time, these criminals and hackers will look for easier targets.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are not difficult per se. However, it can be overwhelming, I think, when we're trying to think about these. You hear all the time you have to have different passwords for every single account that you have. You talk about the different email address and the different mailing address and the different, email address, phone number, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That can get overwhelming, and you kind of wonder maybe sometimes, is it worth it, the extra hassle of having to do all this? If you go through something like this, it definitely, the people that have gone through it will tell you it was worth it or it would be worth it. When we kind of go through this advice here, we'll kind of keep that in mind, because a lot of these things are not incredibly difficult to pull off, but it's important that people know about them. So the foundation sent out this email. You've got 6 kind of bullet points, I guess, giving that advice. You mentioned the first one already there, the limiting public access to business information, because once they have that information, they've kind of got a foot in the door, right?
Sure.
So you want to make it difficult for them there. The other thing that I think is a new phenomenon with humans in general is, again, like the account security thing that we were kind of alluding to there. When you talk about account security, what exactly does that mean, I suppose, and what does that look like?
So basically, you're going to want to make sure that you're not duplicating your information across all your different accounts. A lot of times, one of the things that people do very, very commonly, they use the same password for everything.
Yep.
And so if there's just one little slip, one single data breach, somebody gets that password, now they have access to everything from their banking information to, literally everything that they do on the web. And trust me, those hackers, once they get that one password, they know what people do.
It's off to the races.
And they will get into everything that they possibly can.
Yeah. So when you talk about that, you talk about having different passwords. Again, that is overwhelming to think about, but there are password managers out there that can help you, right?
Yeah, so you want to, of course, nobody wants to try to remember or have to write down 30 different passwords for all these different things. So you can find some really good password managers out there. What a password manager does is it allows you to have one single password that you just keep in your memory, and that's the password to that password manager. And that way you don't have to be putting that out there. They use very, very good security. They're very, very careful. They're aware that they have, all of these passwords that are under their control. And so basically what they do is they automatically generate passwords for you. And then your password manager remembers all those passwords so that you don't have to.
They do the heavy lifting for you on that one.
And they heavily encrypt it too.
One thing I thought that was interesting too in the email that I've heard before, but I'm not sure it's talked about enough, fuel cards, right? Trying, and obviously this is not practical for all the time for everybody out there, but limiting that usage to certain locations and requiring a PIN, that's a big one too, right? That people should be utilizing if they can.
For example, if you never operate in California, then there's no reason why that fuel card should ever be activated in California. And so you can have it locked to certain regions and certain areas so that if somebody, for whatever reason, does happen to get a hold of your information, they can't go off and just, drain all your credit, as it were.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on here, phishing scams, social engineering scams. We've talked about these on the show before. They are literally everywhere. If you check your junk mail folder, you're likely to see a lot of them in there. And these can be kind of tricky to fish out as well. But there are some things that you can be looking for to make sure that you're not the victim of that kind of scam, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't ever click on suspicious links. That's the most basic one. You get an email, you're not sure about it, don't click the link. Just don't. Verify if somebody's trying to contact you and it seems something seems off about it. Use that number that you already know. Use that verified number. call them, say, hey, is this really from you guys? And double check. May take a few minutes, but better safe than sorry.
They rely on that. They rely on that panic, that sense of urgency in people to kind of get you to bite before you've really had a chance to think about it.
They will say, it's an emergency. We need you to do this right now and just make up any reason that you can possibly imagine as to why that you need to do something right now without thinking about it and without double checking.
Right. And when it comes to government agencies, FMCSA, those types of things, typically they're not going to email you. They're going to send you something in the mail. Correct. They may call you, but very rarely, I think. It's mostly a mail thing. So keep that in mind as well, too, because those scams are always going around all the time, and they can look very legit with the letterhead and everything. So got to be careful there. Electronics. This is a big talking point now and will become, I think, an even bigger talking point down the line as we venture into this connected vehicle world that we're starting to live in, I guess, right now. Whatever that's going to look like, we don't know necessarily. But with that in mind, keeping your electronics secure, that's another big one that you're warning people about.
Absolutely. All your information is on your cell phone. Every bit of information about you can be pulled off there. And you are traveling around to all sorts of different places with all sorts of different Wi-Fi connections. And who knows what's going on out there. There are plenty of people that sit around and hackers that use unsecured Wi-Fi connections to steal people's information. My biggest recommendation to people, get yourself a VPN. That's one of the most basic things that you can do. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. Basically, it's a program that just sits there on your phone and encrypts all your data and hides it from hackers. And they do a very good job. There's a couple really good ones out there. A couple examples are ExpressVPN or NordVPN. I personally use ExpressVPN. That's just what I personally use. But there's all sorts of excellent ones out there. And as far as a business expense goes, $100 for a year, something like that. That's not terribly much. I mean, that's way less than the cost of a tank of diesel. And trust me when I say that this could save you a lot of money in the long run.
Yeah, and there are also the monitoring. They monitor your credit for you. That's also a good idea too. And one last point here too: keep an eye on your accounts as much as you can to see if there's anything suspicious in there, and obviously report if something like that does happen. One thing as we finish out here, one thing that you point out in the email, and I think it's a great way to look at all of this, is that the vast majority of truck drivers out there, 99.9% of them, doing all the right things to stay safe on the roads. They're safe drivers. They wear seatbelts. They do their pre-check inspections. And this is really an extension of that, right?
Absolutely. So much of people's lives are lived in the digital world now. So it just like you wear your seatbelt or just like you do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe in the physical realm, as it were, you need to do the things you got to do to keep yourself safe digitally. So much of your money, so much of your time, so much of your work is tied up in that digital world. Got to keep it safe.
We're not living in the metaverse yet.
Not yet, but
It does. Sometimes I wonder if we are actually, but looking for that cabin out in the woods maybe.
One day to
unplug from all of this insanity as the world changes so quickly around us. A lot of great tips in this. Obviously, OOIDA Foundation is a great place. Resources for this type of information. You're always looking out for people out there. Charles, we appreciate you stopping by, and we will see you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you for having me.